Board members, I'd like to call the meeting to order at this time. I believe it's 6 o'clock. Priscilla, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and then also the New Mexico flag pledge, please? Yeah. And Happy New Year, board members. Yeah. We have a new year ahead of us, and there's a lot of things that still need to be done, so we got a lot of work to do. I want to thank all the board members. Let's do our best to make sure that our kids are pretty much the center of our attention, making sure that they are competent when they graduate from high school. And those in the audience, thank you so much and Happy New Year. The Gallup McKinley County Schools employees, Joan, Carmen, and then our superintendent, Mr. Hyatt, and the generals, Giovanna, Pauletta, Gerald, and Tim. Happy New Year. We're going to have a good year. And with that, let's go to item number 2 on our agenda. Oh, okay, roll call. I ahead of myself. Roll call, Joan.
Charles Long.
Here.
Chris Mortensen.
Here.
Michael Schaaf.
Here.
Priscilla Manuelito.
Here.
Kevin Mitchell.
Here.
Bashim. Joan, we do have a quorum, and we will begin our business. Let's go to item number 2, approval of the agenda.
President Long, members of the board, if we are waiting for our attorney to arrive, he should be here about 6:40, but he plays a part in the study circle, and I am requesting of the board to move the study circle to after new business so that we can maybe stall for a little while until we get him here to fulfill his part of the agenda.
So
Okay.
move, Mr. Long.
Yes. Motion's been made by Priscilla Manlito to approve our agenda for this evening's meeting with changes. And the changes that have been made is to move study circle after new business, but before the executive session. That's how the motion has been made. Roll call, Joan.
Mr. Mitchell.
Yes.
Miss Manuelito.
Yes.
Mr. Schaaf.
Yes.
Mr. Mortensen.
Yes.
Mr. Long.
Yes. Thank you, board members. Let's go down to item number 3, approval of the meeting minutes from the December 17th regular board meeting. We had those meeting minutes in our backpack, board pack that we, I assume, had enough time to review. What is the pleasure of the board?
I would like to make a motion that we approve the minutes of December 17th, 2018.
Thank you, Michael. Motion's been made to approve the meeting minutes of December 17th, 2018 by Mr. Michael Schaaf. Roll call, Joan.
Mr. Mitchell.
Yes.
Miss Manuelito.
Yes.
Mr. Schaaf.
Yes.
Mr. Mortensen.
Yes.
Mr. Long.
Yes. Thank you, board members. Let's go down to item number 4, approval of consent agenda items, 4A, 4B, and 4C. Believe we all had sufficient time to review those items on the consent agenda items. What is the pleasure of the board?
Like to motion to approve.
Okay. Motion's been made by Kevin Mitchell to approve the consent agenda items. Roll call, Joan.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Miss Manuelito,
Yes.
Mr. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Mortensen,
Yes.
Mr. Long.
Oh, yes. Thank you, board members. Let's go down to new business, which has become number 5. Item 5. 5A, approval of a resolution on impact aid. Mr. Hyde?
President Long, members of the board, as some of you were in a session a few weeks back, or a month or so, 2 months back, we had a legislative session to discuss impact aid, and also we discussed at that meeting the Yazzie lawsuit. But the impact aid piece, the school districts that were there, Central Consolidated School District, Grants, Gallup McKinley, and also Zuni were present. And during that meeting, there was a suggestion made that we put together a resolution to support the elimination of credit that's taken by the state of New Mexico for the SEG of the impact aid funds that we receive. As you know, we receive a significant amount of dollars for impact aid, yet the state takes 75% credit of those funds. And we are excited. I was going to talk about this a little later, but we worked to start a bill to reduce to zero the amount of credit the state takes. That way we receive all of our impact aid funds, since we are not able to receive a significant amount through our bonding capacity in the area to take care of facility needs and other needs in the district. And during that process, we found out that Senator Clemente was also going to put together a bill and drop a bill for the reduction of impact aid. So we were working at that time with Senator Munoz, and at this time, those two joined forces in a bill that Senator Clemente recently dropped. I just got information today. I think it's 172 and 174. 170, 172 Senate bills, and those dropped recently. And there's 2 pieces to those bills, but basically it eliminates the ability to take credit and reduces it to zero over a 3-year period. So it goes from 75% credit, which it is now, down to 50% credit, down to 25% credit the next year, and the final year and the 3rd year, it would go to zero. This is a very important bill for not only our district, but we ran some numbers and we found there's about a dozen districts that would come out ahead if impact aid dollars were not taken credit for out of those districts. Now, obviously, those dollars get spread out across the whole entire state, but it's every single student that resides on federal land, whether that students in our area or maybe on a military base or wherever it might be, contributes significantly more to the funding formula than any other student in the state of New Mexico through impact aid. And so we have a lot of arguments and positions to take and facts to state to the legislature regarding these funds. As you know, Los Alamos, who receives all of their impact aid type of funds, no credits taken. Why is Los Alamos treated differently than our district or the other 11 districts that would come out ahead? And so this is going to take a big effort to move this forward. There's a lot of people that will fight against us for this because they like receiving our impact aid dollars. It benefits their bottom line for their school districts, but it's not right. Just because it's allowed currently by the federal government doesn't make it right. And so this resolution that's before you, we have put together with our law firm, Cuddy Law, and it is being sent to those 4 districts, and we will look to potentially get a resolution to all the boards in those 12 districts that it would help financially. And then in conjunction, if you do approve this, it will be in conjunction and support those Senate bills that were dropped regarding the reduction of impact aid. So this is basically stating that we support the reduction to zero of impact aid dollars, and we will work to get many others on board. Those other districts, including their legislators, and we will also work to get any tribal entity in the state of New Mexico to support this also, because any student that resides on their lands receives impact aid funding for the school district that they attend to, if the school district does the paperwork to get it done, which is a long process. Which is another important issue on impact aid. As you know, we apply for these funds. If we didn't apply for impact aid, the state couldn't take credit for anything. They'd have to fund us fully. And so that's another argument that we have is, why are you taking money from the district, or credit for money for the district, when we apply for that? It takes us about 3 months to get all the documentation to apply for it on our own, and then the state takes credit for it, and they literally do nothing other than take credit for it. So we're putting a lot of work and have a lot of needs in the district, especially with respect to facilities. Again, we can't bond to the capacity that other districts can, that have a lot of property tax in their area. And so this would allow us to do and build and take care of the facilities and projects that we need to, just like Albuquerque or a property-rich district like Hobbs or Santa Fe or Las Cruces. So this is an important bill, and we're bringing it before you for an approval, again, as supporting documentation to help legislation move through to eliminate impact aid funds, or the credit from impact aid funds from our district. Any questions?
Questions, board members, comments?
Thank you, Mr. Hyatt, for this. I attended the meetings that we had with the school districts, and I think a lot of them, I'm thankful that a lot of them were on the same page as we are. And I think one of the things that I heard during that discussion we were having was to not even apply for it also. And, I think that, even though that, and then when we went to the New Mexico School Board Association convention a few months ago, when I was talking to some of the board members, that was brought across their conversation too. And I think, either way, we don't want to also hurt our children's education. We do get some millions out of this, and I was telling them, I don't think not applying for it wouldn't be the answer, but I think just continuing. I really like the percentage decrease for the state, where they keep, going down by 25% every year, and maybe that would be a way to get them, other school districts or other areas, prepared, and they know that they really can't be looking at the funds that we've generated as a source, and they can start looking for other funding. So I'm glad that the resolution was put together, and that we are going to be moving forward on this. I think it's important. I think it's essential. It's really, really going to help a lot of our, if these changes are made, it's really going to help our school district, especially with our new schools that we are in dire need of. And I think that this is going to be a big game changer on a lot of our stuff with our education system for Gallup McKinley County. So I think just having, us all together, work together on this, and having the other, you said 12?
11 others.
11 other. So you said, is it Clemente that's doing the bill on this?
Yeah, Senator Clemente dropped the bill, and
Okay.
a supporting sponsor of that is Senator Munoz.
Munoz,
And
okay.
I haven't had a chance to look at the bills after they were dropped, but I will here soon and see if there's any others that were part of those bills. But I know that we obviously want all of our legislators, and I believe they all will, in our area, and also San Juan County, McKinley County, and also Cibola County. We believe all of them, and we'd like the audience and the community to put pressure on them to make sure that they support these legislative things that we're supporting. And I'll talk about more of those during my report, but this is a big one. This is an opportunity in the state to look at this issue. There's always been a funding issue as of late in the state of New Mexico. All of a sudden we have a lot more money, and this is the time to start reducing that credit.
Have you heard, excuse me, Mr. Hyatt, have you heard anything, because during that meeting that we were here in the boardroom meeting on this, they also wanted to reach out to the tribes in our area. And do you know if that's also still in discussion, to where Zuni and Laguna, Acoma, And those kind of contacts are being made by the tribes to help us. Either a similar resolution could be passed by our tribal leaders also.
Senator Long, Mrs. Manuelito, we are going to send this resolution to everybody, including those entities and those school districts and legislators and also tribal entities that I discussed after you guys approved tonight. We literally just got this yesterday and made some adjustments even up to the last minute for you tonight to make sure that it was presented in a way and worded in a way that is effective for us in supporting these bills. But yeah, with Senator Clemente, and we will look to get all tribal entities. Obviously, the Navajo Nation and Zuni tribe, we believe, are both in support of, and we believe most, if not all, tribal governments will support this.
Any other questions, comments? The only question I have, Mike, is Kansas and New Mexico, they're an equalized state, meaning that I guess our state is taking a lot of credit for Impact 8. Now, after the legislation that's been introduced passes and let's say signed by the governor, would that make that go away, the state being an equalized state?
I don't believe so. I think it's unequal right now. I don't think we're an equalized state. When our students are contributing probably almost $1,000 more per student to approximately, I'm going to use approximates, more dollars to this particular fund with respect to $500,000 in impact aid, it's unequalized.
Yeah.
And so I think this puts us on a playing field where we'll be more equalized if we receive those funds back. Again, this relates to, for me, I look at it as our bonding capacity. We don't have a high bonding capacity like other districts because we don't have the property. And impact aid is property in lieu of taxes. It's a PILT. The purpose of it was to replace those funds that we don't get through a property tax because we can't tax federal land. And so I see it as making it more equal. Most of the state doesn't feel that way because at some point they wanted to make sure property-rich districts were taken care of. They even state that in some of the wording in state documents that they're taking impact aid, yet they want to make sure they're preserving and not hurting property-rich districts. It specifically says that in their documentation. And so I think there's several issues. There may also be in the future, if we can't get any movement here with this bill or with our 2 lawsuits that we're a part of, then we may need to look at other legal recourse.
Okay. So, board members, what is your pleasure? Okay.
Oh, dang it, I just had a question that.
You can think about it
Yeah,
for a second,
think
Ms.
about it.
Manuelito. Mr. Hyatt, approximately as this steps down like per year or whatever, approximately how much money is this worth to us each year?
Giovanna, do you have any specifics you could give on us? I'll shoot out a couple numbers. I believe we get about $29 million in impact aid a year. And so they're going to take 75% credit of the impact aid piece outside of the Indian Ed section, special ed section, construction funds that we receive. They don't take credit for those 3 parts of the impact aid, but the general impact aid fund, they do.
Looking at the
Giovanna?
last 7 completed years, on average, the credit that was taken was $20,860,283 per year.
28.
So it was 29 million total. The credit's actually about 20 million.
And that's based upon the variability of impact aid. The state actually takes impact aid based upon a date of June 1st to May 31st. So each year it's based upon that final June to the end of May, and then the credit is taken in the month of June for that subsequent period.
So if you think over 3, it's a lot of money per year.
Yeah.
A lot that we could do with. We figured we probably have right now over $100 million worth of inequity in respect to our facilities compared to a property-rich district, which lends towards our other lawsuit, the Zuni lawsuit. So that money could significantly help us get air conditioning back up to speed, build the proper buildings that were more than adequate like other school districts are building. We're building nice buildings, but they're not sufficient for an education. And so not only that, fixing things that even fields, playing fields, those types of things. There's a host of things that we could do more with that money so that we are more equalized with the rest of the state.
Thank you.
And I would just like to briefly add that the state takes credit for those funds up front prior to us receiving them. So we receive our state equalization guarantee in 12 monthly payments.
Mm-hmm.
So prior to us actually receiving payment for impact aid, they've already reduced that payment. So we have to be very cautious as an impact aid district on our cash to make sure that we have sufficient cash to meet all of our obligations, because we never know when that payment's going to come in. As many of you are aware right now, the federal government's on a shutdown. Thankfully, we kind of knew that was coming after hearing all the news, and we really pestered for our payment early. Had we not, we would probably not get it until much later in the end of the year.
I know this, it was stated in the resolution, and I'm really thankful that it is, with the Yazzie and Martinez case, that, you know, that's one thing that is going to benefit us right now. And I think that's one of our strong holes that we have on this. And because I think with them saying, you know, helping at risk or low income students, you know, but yet they're still taking away a huge chunk of our funds, you know, that just proves that, you know, that will help us to hopefully get this, you know, impact aid resolution passed. And the other question I just thought of and remembered was, is there any other additional impact aid bills that are out there? I know when we were meeting here, it sounded like each of them kind of had some kind of impact aid bill that they wanted to push or to present, or is this the only impact aid bill?
I think when they were talking about that in our legislative meeting, I think they were referencing old bills that they had dropped. I don't believe they were really discussing new ones that were coming about this year or being dropped this year. I could be wrong on that, but we have not heard of any other bill being dropped that has to specifically do with impact aid, but there have been others in the past that people have sponsored and supported.
So have you heard of any other bills that are against what we're trying to do, that they want to not to do this plan?
Well, they already do it, so there probably wouldn't be a bill for that. That doesn't mean that people aren't starting to talk about this and becoming concerned, because they obviously like it when Gallup McKinley County School District and their students off of Native American lands are footing the bill for their children's education.
Yeah, this is a very important bill that's going to be debated at Santa Fe, and impact aid has been an issue for a long time. You know, the Navajo Nation and even the school district here, I think they've been trying to fight the way the state has been distributing impact aid monies for a number of years. And so when the legislature changes, makes changes according to I guess part of the using the resolutions that we passed tonight, that's going to become a historic moment for us in the school district. It's going to be able to provide funding. It's going to be able to provide funds for us that our kids are entitled to, but we're deprived of it. So this is a very important issue, and I believe that we need to approve the resolution. So what is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Long, with that said, I would like to motion to approve the resolution for the impact aid for Gallup McKinley County Schools.
Gushi, motion's been made by Priscilla Manolito to approve request for reform on credit and use of federal impact aid funds on funding for all public schools. That's the motion that has been made. Roll call, Joan.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Miss Manuelito,
Yes.
Mr. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Mortensen,
Yes.
Mr. Long.
Yes. Okay, thank you, board members. Let's go down to 5B.
President Long, members of the board, this is another resolution to help us wrap up the sale of Oñate. This has been a several multi-months. Hopefully it doesn't turn into a year process. As you know, we've had to go to the state for permission and go through a bunch of hoops, some of the bureaucratic things that we have to do to get things done. But we're really close. It's just going to take signing some more documents as we continue to move. We want to get it done as soon as possible without dragging on it. And so our attorney, Bob Rosenbro, suggested that just to wrap up this final part of the sale, nothing's changed. It's still the same amount that you already approved. This resolution just gives me the authority to finalize and sign off the last remaining documents as we finish things up. I think right now we're just trying to wrap up some things with the gas lines, getting some things installed. But as soon as those things are done, rather than waiting for the next board meeting to have an actual signature on something that you guys have already approved, he suggested that we put together a resolution giving me signatory authority on this. So that's what this resolution is.
Questions, comments, board members?
Mike, can you just remind me on how much we were selling it for?
$400,000.
Thank you.
And that was the appraised value.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? What is the pleasure of the board?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the resolution authorizing the sale of the former Juan de Yanati Elementary School site to the new Life Episcopal Church.
Goshen, motion's been made by Kevin Mitchell to approve the resolution authorizing the sale of the former Juan de Onyate Elementary School site to the New Life Apostolic Church, I guess, pursuant to the terms of a purchase agreement previously approved by the board and approval by the New Mexico State Board of Finance, and designating Superintendent Mike Hyatt to execute and sign all documents necessary to close the sale. That's the motion. Roll call, Joan.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Miss Manuelito,
Yes, John.
Mr. Shaw,
No.
Mr. Mortensen,
Yes.
Mr. Long.
Yes. Okay. Motion carries. We approve that resolution. Okay, board members. Now let's go to study circle. We'll go with public comment. Mr. Foster.
Good evening, board members and the staff that are here today. This is regarding the recent annual Gallup High School Basketball Invitational Tournament that occurred over the weekend, where we received a large amount of snow. Problems of not clearing the pavement or the paved area where parking on the south side. And this is observation, and I have comments with that, where people from out of town, from southern New Mexico, teams from the state of Arizona, Navajo Nation, and the local teams, grandparents, elderlies, were in an area that was dangerous, where there was ice, and the snow wasn't removed, only removed on the north side. And that, I believe, is a hazardous, it's a safety issue. And I believe that the athletic director and the principal there weren't responsible to the community. It's dangerous, and I don't know if that's been cleared now. We were still there when people were leaving, getting stuck, leaving the area on Saturday night after the championship game. My recommendation on that is, I would say the athletic director and the principal should work with the central office to remove the snow, because I think the school district do have machines to remove that snow completely. And then maybe you can work with the city of Gallup. They have done an outstanding job of removing snow over Larry Mitchell Activity Center. The other one is the sales of T-shirts, where parents, particularly one of the fathers, became rage upon selling the T-shirts to people. Complaints from him was removing his boxes, and he went into a rage. And I think that my recommendation on that is maybe you can do background checks on people that are part of the sales of T-shirts. And then the other recommendation on that is maybe you can have PR, public relations fellowship to be more courteous. Thank you.
Thank you. Sunshine?
Yate. Good evening, board members, and Happy New Year. My name is Sunlatsa Jim Martin, and my nickname is Sunshine. I am here as a parent. I'll be speaking this evening as a parent of a high school student, 2 high school students actually, and an elementary student. First, I would like to say in this year of 2019, it is a year that I really want to recognize our women leaders, and congratulations to Priscilla Manuelito for joining the Navajo Nation Board of Education. It's great to have one of our own Gallup McKinley County School Board members joining our Navajo Nation, and I think that's going to help us as a school, help us as a district, and make sure that all of our voices are heard from McKinley County. So I wanted to extend that in the new year. I also wanted to share a big thank you to those of you who were influential in creating McKinley Academy. I am a parent of a McKinley Academy student, 2 actually, and it is one of the greatest things that has happened for our Tohatchi High School community. I say that because in all the years I've been coming up here to advocate as a parent for our rural county schools, the McKinley Academy program has truly moved our students, particularly my students, my children, and has advanced them in their education and their learning and has challenged them. So for me, I was one of the critics at the beginning. I wasn't sure if this would work, but because I knew Gallup McKinley County Schools was behind the times in getting college degrees for our high school students, I wanted to put my children into this program and give it a shot. And I'm so thankful to everyone who was influential in making this program happen. I think it's a wonderful thing for our Gallup McKinley County School District. With that said, I want to just ask Mr. Hyatt that the principals be reminded that our students are still a part of their home schools and they cannot be neglected. They're still a part of their clubs, they're still a part of their sports, they're still connected to their communities. And the principals cannot treat McKinley Academy students as outcasts or neglect them and fail to communicate information to those students through their teachers. So that's one gap, I think, that exists, and I've brought it to the attention to the leadership at McKinley Academy, but they've been great to work with, and I do think that's a wonderful thing that we should showcase as a school district. Lastly, I want to just share that there is a concern about Navajo language and culture classes at our elementary school. I know that there's been debate over the years about getting Navajo language and culture through K through 5th, and whether it's going to be a pull-out program or if it's going to be an elective or some type of program like that. I still think there's a big need and a big gap for Navajo language and culture for 4th and 5th graders. I don't know if that's because changes have been made here at central office or if there's just miscommunication down the line, but I know 4th and 5th graders are not getting Navajo language and culture like they should be. I know there's even an opt-out opportunity, and I don't think many parents understand that when they opt out, their child will not be getting Navajo language and culture. So I'd ask the superintendent to look into that. And then lastly, I forgot to mention, buses are still a problem in our area. Although we have a wonderfully paved road, we are still 2 miles short of getting transportation to our children. And parents are still, after 3 years, 5 years, I don't know, remind me, but parents are still having to get their child to a bus stop on the other side of bridges, and it could be 2 miles or more. To you, that might not seem like a lot, but to parents without transportation, that's a hardship. They have to figure out a way to get to those bridges to pick up their children or drop off their children. And I continue to say to those parents, keep speaking up, keep advocating, because 2 miles to us in the rural community is not an easy thing to address. It can cause problems, and I can say that attendance for our children is a part of that. It's leading to our kids not getting to school or having to be checked out early from school because nobody can pick them up at the bus stops. So I'd ask that we look into that again. Thank you.
Agushi, Ndoke. With that, let's go down to 6B. Or, well, we changed it.
Yeah, we switched it.
It's okay then. Well, 5B. Reports, superintendent's report.
President Long, members of the board. I'm sorry.
I figured that, since we changed it, that became 6.
Yeah, well, maybe it is. Whatever it is, I'm up, I think. President Long, members of the board, I have several items here to discuss as we wait for our attorney. I'm going to talk. I know I've kept you informed, almost totally informed of some of our water situations. We've had a cold spell that everybody knows in the negative degree temperature range, and we've had several schools with busted pipes, and typically these are in our older schools. Kind of goes back to our Impact Day discussion we had a little while ago, and I'll talk about that again. But Gallup High School, I think we're up to 4 water line breaks in that school. It has got to the point where we cannot open school tomorrow. Right now, we're on schedule to open on Thursday for Gallup High students that are attending that school. McKinley Academy students that are a part of Gallup High School will still be in attendance at the UNM campus. So we have several walls in that area, or in that building. We're about a foot or so up, water penetrated, and so we had to cut the sheetrock out. We believe we'll have all the sheetrock recovered in those areas Wednesday, and we're hoping we can get furniture back in before Thursday. So we have construction crew working at nights to make sure that happens so we can get students back in school as soon as possible. We have an inspector coming out tomorrow to give us more feedback onto whether that's still possible, and they think we're making enough progress to do so. In addition to that, that same day, this all happened on New Year's Day for 3 schools, Gallup High School, Gallup Central High. We're finishing with flooring, got the carpet ripped out in that school, ready for school tomorrow at Gallup Central High, and are fixing that and to fix that leak. And Rocky View had, I think, 5 or so heating coils in their classrooms from the furnace boiler room that broke. And so we've already replaced all of those, and so we're ready to go tomorrow, and we'll have heat in those classrooms. Since then, we've had 4 other areas affected. Twin Lakes Elementary, which it was in a pump house, not actually in the school building, but we've repaired that. Navajo Pine had a significant leak in the cafeteria area, which we've also replaced, and a computer lab, which we're working on now on the flooring. JFK had one yesterday, so that's one of the newer construction projects that we've had that's had an issue. And then we had, as teachers were supposed to leave, or staff members were supposed to leave their heat on along with water dripping while they were gone in case we got a cold spell, which we thought we would get. We've had a few that didn't follow those cautions. And so when they came home and turned their heat back on, found out that the pipes had busted. And so that's part of living in this part of the country. You learn pretty quick when that happens. And so we'll have those taken care of. Like I said, Gallup High School will work hard to get those done. In addition, there's been a lot of discussion as the new governor, Governor Lujan Grisham, has come in. She's making changes to education, and the first as she campaigned on. And one of those campaign promises was to eliminate PARC testing from the state. In addition, that leads to a reduction or the removal of teacher effectiveness scores that come from those PARC exams. And so last week she did a presentation or announcement that she's going to repeal the PARC testing. Some people are wondering if that's happening this year or next year. Even in her statements that day and also in some comments today from Lieutenant Governor Howie Morales, they mentioned that PARC testing will still take place this spring. It'll be reduced though, so there won't be as much testing as there was last year in math and reading, or ELA. It'll be reduced approximately a third in ELA, and they didn't state for sure how much the reduction was in mathematics. They said that they would likely have a test, an assessment to replace, a summative assessment to replace that exam next year, but gave no other further information. And so I sent some information out to our principals and administrators to let them know we'll continue to move forward as is, but as things change, we find out what new assessments coming out, we'll make the adjustments necessary to make sure that we still are in alignment. If we have to make changes to our curriculum or even to our own interim assessments, we'll do so as quickly as possible. But you figure it's going to take some time to set up a new assessment, and then we'll test new next year, which will be baseline data, and then it'll take another year after that before you get growth numbers from that state test. So it's a quick turnaround for the state. They have a lot on their plate, as we know. They also are still looking for I believe, a permanent Secretary of Education. Today I heard, I think he's the second in command as far as a director on the LESC. Tim Hand is the interim secretary for PED. And so we'll work closely with him, and I believe Lieutenant Governor Morales is also overseeing education for the cabinet for the governor, and was actually invited this Thursday to attend a meeting with them to talk about education and how things are going to roll out. So I'll have a little bit more information about how things are going to transition coming up this Thursday, and I'll let you know as soon as I get out of that meeting. In addition, we have been having legislative talks, as you know, and there's 4 main areas. We have a lot of things having to do with the Yazzie lawsuit, which we were a plaintiff in, and that ruling, obviously, if the legislature solves those things that the judge said they needed to solve, there's a host of things that need to be done legislatively in order to make that happen. And there's lots of different ideas out there, and there's a lot of politics being played and things going on with respect to this lawsuit. There are 4 areas that we are, although we support a lot of things that are being proposed for the solution to that lawsuit, there are 4 main areas in which we will be pushing the hardest for, which will affect Gallup McKinley County Schools and our students the most. And so we encourage community members, legislators who we're in conversations with, and anyone to support these things that we feel give us the biggest benefit to our students. One of those is impact aid. We just had a long discussion about impact aid, and so I won't go into any more discussion on that. But the next 3 are the at-risk index and the funding formula. It's currently, I believe, at a 0.13. I've heard discussions of a 0.15. We're actually seeking a 0.366, which is a significant amount of money, hundreds of millions of dollars for at-risk students, to target at-risk students. And that's what the lawsuit was about. It was about meeting the needs of at-risk students. And so there's a lot of talk about raising teacher pay and dumping a bunch of hundreds of millions of dollars into lots of different things. But the at-risk, we have not heard a lot of attention being given to that. And so we are going to be pushing really hard to make sure that the judge, as the judge ruled, that at-risk is a specific important piece that needs to be addressed, and it needs to be raised dramatically. In most funding formulas across the country, it's about a 0.25. And so we're at a 0.13. And not all funding formulas are the same, I understand that, but it needs to be significantly raised. We're number 3 on the list of the most at-risk students for our population on average, and so it's an important piece that we need to focus on. The last 2 are bilingual funds. There's a bilingual multicultural educational piece to the funding formula. And we're asking for the doubling of that number so we have more funds for bilingual education. And then lastly, we'll see how this goes down. We are looking at supporting a bill that returns rural isolation funding to our school district. We have attempted this for a couple years in the past, but we redrafted that bill to help us as a district meet the needs of such a diverse and sparse population, and communities that are spread out over almost 5,000 square miles. So this particular bill would bring in over $2 million more at least into our district to help meet our needs, and so that we can do a better job at making sure that we have things taken care of and business taken care of with respect to meeting the needs of all students across 100 miles to one school, 50 to several others, and 25 to several others around our county. Lastly, just really quickly, I wanted to mention Lincoln Elementary. It is pretty much completed. We're wrapping up a few items. We expect within the month to be transitioning into that new school. So we'll be moving Lincoln Elementary that's into the new Lincoln Elementary. At the end of the year, we'll move Roosevelt also into Lincoln Elementary. There's been some concerns about staff losing their jobs. That will not happen. All staff will have a job with that transition. Nobody's positions being, nobody's going to lose their job over this move. And the last couple things. Strategic plan, we're hoping to bring that to you next meeting. If not, for sure it'll be in February. We're wrapping up just the design of that and how we'll roll it out to the community, to staff, and also a presentation for you. We're just looking at the layout of those documents and making sure it's in a form and the wording is appropriate for all those different stakeholders. Through elementary, we'll start soon. There was a delay with the state in signing some documents for the funding for that school, but I heard that they're actually going to break ground this week. So I think the cold weather also hindered that a little bit. And lastly, there's an audit that will be coming soon. We're waiting for the state for approval for that audit before we bring it to you. Hopefully next meeting. If not, again, I'll have to wait until February to bring that to you. We're just waiting on the state. So any questions?
Questions?
Thank you,
Priscilla?
sir. Thank you. Thank you for your report, sir. With the water line breaks in the schools, is any of that being paid by insurance, or is that all our bill?
President Long, Mrs. Mangalito, we contacted our insurance right away the day after, I think it may have been the day of or the day after of New Year's. And we met with them today, actually, and they'll be covering those water leaks. We have about I think it's $25,000 deductible. We expect to be over $100,000 due to all the damage. Again, Gallup High being the worst. In addition to that, I don't know if I've mentioned this to you lately, but we did have an issue down in Rama, which we discussed with our insurance person to make sure that there's a wall that was collapsing in the weight room. We had to condemn part of that building, and so we have to replace that wall. And we talked today to make sure that they will cover that, and they will cover most of the cost of that to rectify that issue. They'll replace the wall. We just have to do a little bit of concrete work outside by some basketball courts by the back door. So they're working with us, and we're putting pressure on them to make sure that they fulfill the policy that we have with them.
Thank you. And under parks, sir, I've been talking with different parents and different stakeholders at the chapter on even our council delegate on this, and I think a lot of people are assuming that just because the park is the governor is no longer doing the park, that there won't be a test in replace of that park. They think that that's just another test that our kids don't need to do. We won't even have to do any more testing under. And I'm like, no, that's not. I just wanted that clarified, and I don't know how we can get that message out to our parents that our stakeholders that just because the governor did do away with the park doesn't mean that there's going to be something in its place to show the.
Correct. A part of our ESSA plan with the federal government, it requires a summative assessment, I believe, and so it'll be replaced. And it was mentioned even today in our testing meeting that we had with them that there would be a replacement, and they're working on that right now.
And the last thing is, I think one thing we need to continue to remember is with, of course, in the ESSA and everything here at our local level, is continuing to have the relationship with our tribes and having that tribal consultation to where whatever is happening and whatever is decided, that we have that communication with our tribal leaders, because I know most of the time, they're not really, some, I can't say, some are very involved, but I think just having maybe another report given to our tribal leaders would be something we can kind of look into once we kind of see more of a foundation and development of what our governor is going to be doing. I think just continuing to have that talk with our tribal leaders is going to be very important. So thank you.
Any other? Dench, Korea, that's it. Goshi, thank you. Before we go down to 5B2, let me do 3. Any board reports? Dench? None? Okay. And then 5B4, notices and communication. You can read that on your own. So with that, we have the man of the hour here, and Andy.
President Long, members of the board, I had asked Mr. Sanchez to come do a presentation on Robert's Rules for board meetings. We had talked about this probably several times over the last few years, but we just hadn't got our training together, and it came up again a few months back. And so I actually have one question I want him to address, because I didn't talk to him about this beforehand. Is this training, will it count as credits for the board?
Yeah, if we submit it to
Okay.
to Joe Guillen at the school.
Okay. I'd mentioned that it likely would be able to, so we can do that paperwork so that it gets done.
Can you
this
put
will
us down
count
for 5 hours each, please?
Well,
wanna
they
be
can talk
here.
to them now.
But anyway, Happy New Year, Andy.
Happy New Year to all members of the board and board president. Thank you very
Oh.
much, and hope all of your holidays were well and your families are well.
Thank you.
You got the floor.
Thank you. Well, obviously, we're going to do some training on the Robert's Rules of Order, but we're not really doing the Robert's Rules of Order because it would require you having a parliamentarian here all the time, because the rules are so extensive and detailed. What we'd like to do is have the board, as you guys are structured as a governing body, you can set your own rules about how you do business. And for example, the School Boards Association has a sample or a list of rules on its website. You don't necessarily want to follow it. For example, on their website they have it that the majority of the board has to vote on a member abstaining from a vote. If you do not get a majority vote allowing you to abstain, your abstention counts as a positive vote towards the motion. I'm not sure that is the best way to handle the handling of the board. If a board member feels that they should abstain from a vote because of either a conflict, a perceived conflict, it shouldn't be subject to a majority vote of the board. They should be allowed to do that. And the board can adopt the rule that an abstention is just that, as though you were present for voting. And the vote goes to what the remaining quorum of the board. And that might be a better way to do that. But so I'm not going to say, let's just go to the School Boards Association model rules. I think that we have to, as a board, you need to decide how you like to conduct business. But obviously, for the rules of order to exist, what it is to create a mechanism, a set of rules by which you all communicate with each other, and some sort of procedural process when things get hot and testy, and how things are supposed to go. Now, what we would recommend is the board consider using the Robert's Rules of Orders as a baseline, but then having them be modified pursuant to the board's wishes and to what the board does. Now, the board policy you already have is BEDD, and there's an associated regulation that goes along with it in your board policies. It does not address every and all situations that the board could be subject to, and that regulation might be something, the BEDDR might be something you guys would like to take a look at and address other situations that have come up in your boards and how you want to address it. The board president has a vital role with regards to the rules of order in conducting the board meetings. The board president will rule on motions in or and out of order with regards to how process is being going forward with the board meeting. Also keeps you on track with the agenda, and also keeps you on pace with regards to how you conduct your meeting. It ensures a reasonable standard of courtesy and civility for the speakers, and the board president may be the very first avenue for making sure that when things get hot, that they get properly put back into at least procedural form. As I've spoken to many of the board members before and provided you with training and done training with the school law conference, there's nothing that requires that you all be best friends. There's nothing that requires that you all not have different opinions. In fact, your diversity and the fact that you have different opinions is what makes a better board. Is that all opinions, all diversity of thought can be heard and can be considered. And so that there has to be a process to not make it personal, to make it businesslike. And what I like to try to tell the board is that it's not personal, just go by the vote. Everybody lives and dies by the vote. Sometimes you're on the good end of a vote, sometimes you'll be on the bad end of a vote, but it's time to move on with the process after that. Board President will also address questions and procedure of parliamentary rules. We'll try to keep that standardized so that everybody can address and know what the Board President is talking from. To call a recess at any time. That is a much not used very often by boards, but it could be done. If you have a lot of people who are doing public comment, it's a controversial subject matter that's going on and the emotions are rising or falling between the board or between the board and the public, call a recess for 15-20 minutes. Have it come back. You can call a recess for a couple of days if you would like to do that. In other words, you can continue the meeting, and that could be done as I think at times could be a very valuable tool, is having continue the meeting and say, we'd like to continue the meeting and we'll reconvene on Thursday at this same time, same place. And the meeting notice applies. You just provide notice that you have continued the meeting. It is the same meeting. It'll have the same minutes, and it'll be considered as one continuous meeting from that point on. And you reconvene and to address some of these issues, or even if you have to expand your agenda. Suppose that you have far more public comment than you ever anticipated, and you have to continue the meeting. You can continue the meeting for the next day to allow everybody an opportunity to speak, if that comes to pass it there. You can also adjourn the meeting if there's an emergency, and that could also happen if water. You guys were talking about water break. If something would have happened and the building had a function, you could make it an emergency adjournment. Under the board policy, the second is required for all motions to do that. I think that is a very good practice, and the board should continue to use the second with regards to the process by which you address actions by the board. That allows it to be very systematically addressed. It also allows motions that do not have a lot of air under it to die for the lack of a second. And that can move the process along quite quickly. When you do not have a process in which you have a second, any board member can raise a motion at any time and it has to be considered. And that takes time away from the board. So if somebody, wants to, change the school logo and it just doesn't have air under it, it'll die for a lack of a second and you move on. So, no
Andy,
discussion.
Excuse me, Andy.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
at this time, we don't have a second, but we can start to incorporate that after we update our policy.
Your policy right now requires you to have a second.
We don't have a second.
No, the School Boards Association model stuff on their website does not advises boards not to require a second. I do not believe your policy BEDD requires that you have a second. I would recommend the board continue to use that policy and require all motions to be having a second.
I think,
We'll start now.
like Priscilla said, we don't have a second.
Yeah, we
And
haven't done a second.
I don't know
Andy.
how long
Since
that's
I've
been
been here.
like that.
It's been,
Wow. Okay,
we-
well, your board policy says that you have to have a second.
Yeah, so does that mean that all the actions in the past
No, it
are
doesn't.
null and void?
No,
Yeah.
no, it just means that you just didn't follow the procedure within BEDD.
Well, I guess we've been following that. It's revised Robert's Rule of Order that we call Gallup McKinley County Schools Rules of Order.
Exactly. It's all yours, just modified.
Okay.
But I would recommend that you guys actively do it as a practice, is call for a second. And that was second. So there you go. With regards to talking a little bit more about the board minutes, I always want to be able to make sure that the board understands it as well as the public understand it, that with regards to the board minutes, they're not required to be verbatim. And in fact, the fact that you record stuff is not the official minutes of the meeting. The official meetings, all they need to record is the date, time, place, and nature of the meeting, the members who were present, who were absent, and the substance of the proposals and the votes that were taken and the actions that were taken. That's basically all that's required to be in your official minutes. Okay? The fact that we have a document or that we have a recording is a public's record issue, but they are in no way the official record of this body. Okay?
Now, Andy, on those meeting minutes, I know we do record our meeting minutes, and just doing the meeting minutes, that just identifies the time, place, and so forth. And if a community member wants a verbatim, then we would go to the recording to do that, or how do we?
No, the minutes, the way the statutes start, the minutes are the minutes. And if they have the minimum requirement, they're the official minutes. In other words, if somebody wants to say, well, I want you to put this back into your minutes, that didn't cover just the votes and who was present and what was going on, that's not a requirement. Now, the fact that we have a recording of your meeting means that there may be a public record that denotes what took place at the meeting, but that is not the official minutes. In other words, when you do your bond, sale of bonds, whatever, and they want you to attach your minutes, it's not going to be a tape recording. It's going to be whatever official minutes that you had, because those are the only official minutes of the meeting and what will officially record the actions of the Board of Education. Okay, because the recordings, while they may be a public record, the administration can set forth whatever the records retention policy is going to be with regards to them. Prior to the televising and recording of these meetings, what used to happen is a tape recording would be made to assist the board secretary in putting the minutes together, and the tape recorder was then not retained any longer. It was just put in rotation and taped over. What happens, it was a public record for as long as it existed until it taped over. Okay? And because it was only being used as an aid to allow the board secretary to put together the minutes. Okay? Now, you may choose as a policy to have a longer retention on what your recordings are doing. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody can't hit their DVR at home or go on the website and download it and have a recording, but it will not be a public record at that point.
Andy, if a board member, because I know that they say that minutes are legal documentation. So if a board member has something that they want put in the minutes to be the actual, to have an actual documentation, we can request to have, I want to have this in the minutes, and then whatever the board member has to say. Therefore, it's considered documented.
Well, it could be done by board vote to do it, but if it's beyond what is the statute requires, the board does not necessarily have to do it. Now, if the board had failed to record a vote, in other words, one of the board members left during executive session. When we came out, we took a vote. The board took a vote on an action item coming out of executive session, but the minutes never reflect that a board member had left during the course of the executive session. And you tell the minutes, we want to modify and amend the minutes because it doesn't reflect that, for example, that Board President Long had left during the executive session and was not part of the vote. That would have to be amended into the minutes because it's a required portion that the statute says has to be recorded. Now, if it's going to be, that board members have made comments and discussions with regards to a vote, then it's the board's discretion as to whether it goes into the minutes or not. Because the discussions at the vote don't necessarily have to be in the minutes, because the statute doesn't necessarily require it. It only requires is who was there and who voted and what action was officially taken is all that's required to be in the minutes under statute. So if you would like a comment or some explanation be put into the minutes, it'll be by subject by majority vote. If you want to, you could just put everything you want in the minutes, including recipes and everything else. It doesn't matter, but it's not a requirement.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, board members?
Now, all of you should be given is what I call a nice little cheat table for you. And it's not a cheat table, it's a nice little reference thing. And it tells you parliamentary procedures at a glance and allows you to get the language down with regards to how you conduct your stuff. It has what you want to do is one column, what you need to say to get that, whether or not you may be interrupted while you're doing it, whether it can be seconded, and we had that discussion about seconds. Is the motion debatable? What motions are debatable and what are not? Is it amendable? And what vote is required? So if you're going to introduce a business or a motion or primary motion, it starts off with I move for that particular item. It can be very detailed. Another way that has happened before is a board president might say, I will entertain a motion, and then explain the motion, and that just allows a second to be made to do that, and that may be some things that are already structured into your agenda. That might be easier if the board president, if you guys have it as a practice where the board president says, I will entertain a motion now to accept the recommendation of the superintendent on blank. And that all it requires is another board member to second, then it goes to vote. However, go ahead.
Andy, does it have anywhere, I know I've been on a few boards that you have to have a motion, a second, and then a discussion, and then a vote. There's some places that do it the opposite. They have the discussion, then the motion, then the second, and then the vote. Is there, do you know if it states any which way?
Robert's Rules of Order goes, you do the motion, you do the second, and then the board president calls for discussion, and then you have your discussion and your debate.
Because I think with, like what you said earlier, if there is a motion but there's no second, then that,
You don't need to be discussing it
Yeah.
at all.
okay.
Okay, so you got your motion, you got your second, and then there will be called for discussion. And if you have a discussion, that's where you debate it. If you don't have it, you can go right to the vote.
Yeah.
Yes,
No.
or I second the motion, I so move, get a second. Yeah.
No.
If the board president is setting forth, for agenda items, it might move the meeting along if your board president is the one that says, I will entertain a motion now to accept the recommendation of the superintendent to buy socks, for example. Yes, it could be I so move, Mr. Morrison says I second, and now you go to vote. Or it could be
So
that you
he's not
finish the
making the
discussion.
So he's not making the motion?
No.
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 He's
Or he
suggesting
wants- he
he's
wants a
suggesting
motion.
to move the process along. Of course, the board president can say, I move that we adopt that, and then it can be seconded and voted upon. It's, again, how you say it. And if you have a discussion, and it's moving along, and somebody would like to just, let's get this done with, a board member could say, I now call the motion, I call the motion for a vote, and then it will go to the vote. And then board president will verify no other debate, the debate is over, we move on to the vote. No, it's just procedural. Yeah, not everything you do has to require a motion. Just getting through your action items is gonna be
Action item.
enough of the procedural, parliamentary procedural that you should concentrate on your agenda items and on your new business. Okay, all motions can be amended. Okay, this is where you get complicated. I make a motion to buy socks. Okay, that is the pending motion. Could be, well, somebody during the debate says, well, I move to have it amended to say the motion should be amended to the school district buys blue socks. Okay, so what happens when you have that? You take the motions in order. So the board president will call, we're going to motion to pen and was seconded on buying socks. Do that, then immediately goes, that was a second motion, you have your vote, and you have your second motion to amend. Now the only way to modify this is that you could, if suppose Mr. Mitchell made a motion to buy socks. You may call as a point of order, ask Mr. Mitchell, would you be willing to amend your motion to buy blue socks so that we don't have to have two motions? And he may say, I hereby change my motion to be a motion to buy blue socks, and then you can move on one motion.
What about substitute motions?
Substitute motions, you have to take them in order. Because the procedural way that the Roberts Rules is that once you start introducing motions, you as a body have to address them in the order that they're being presented to you.
So let's say that, we have an issue and there's a main motion made, but then another school board member says, I want to do a substitute motion. I guess that's what I mean.
For example, if Mr. Mitchell would like to withdraw his motion and substitute it or amend it, he can do so before it's being considered. Okay? You can do that. But after you get your second, you're done. You have to take it in order.
Gushi?
Right? Okay, you can also move to have something studied further. That would be, I move that we defer this matter to the administration or to a subcommittee of the board or something like that. You can make that motion on an agenda item that it be due. Of course, it would still need a second and it would still need a majority vote, and it can be debated. Okay? You can also move to postpone a matter until. You can do that as well, which is basically your table motion. I move that we table this. Again, can't be interrupted. It has to be seconded. Board president will call for a debate or discussion, and then you move to, then it can be amended, and then of course you have a majority vote. If you move to defer consideration, which is a different process, defer consideration of a matter indefinitely, you're not only tabling it, you're basically taking it off the business of the board for a specific time period. In other words, you have to understand, if somebody says, I want to table something, that can come back. In fact, it can come back in the same meeting. Okay? Comes back. If you defer consideration, you're basically, the board is telling everybody involved that the issue of buying socks, we're not even going to address until April. Okay? That means if somebody comes in March with a motion to buy socks, that's already been deferred until April. Okay? But if you table something, it can come back. Okay? However, matters under the rules of order do expire after 3 months. On whether you defer stuff. I move to prevent reconsideration for 6 months. There you're also doing the deferred. Now you're setting a period of time to do that. For example, it may be a contract that you've issued or whatever, professional services or otherwise, any kind of contract, you can defer consideration of it for a period until it expires. You want to do that, and it's taken as a motion. So it's very important that you know what is being said, what is being moved, and what it means. Okay? Reconsideration of something that was already disposed of at the meeting has to be within the meeting itself. In other words, you had a previous vote on an item at this particular board meeting. It is possible for you to, I move that we, or later, reconsider this motion. And you can bring it back. because there may have been public comment, there may have been information the administration had given you during that. In other words, you're not stuck with your action items at the board meeting. If you guys get information, suppose I call your superintendent and say, or get his attention and say, you know what, they can't do that, what's going on, and he can get your attention to it. If you want to, you can go and do that. I move that we now reconsider our previous action, and you can basically change your previous votes, change your previous action. But it has to be done within the meeting itself, the meeting in which the original action was taken. In other words, it's an undo. Okay? Take up this matter previously tabled is how you bring back the tabled action. Okay, now I also put in here, because of the Open Meeting Act, it has to be on your agenda. Okay? So you can't table something like last August and then at this meeting make a motion to untable an item and bring it back if it's not on the agenda. Okay? The next one is a very good item is I move to consider out of order agenda items. Instead of modifying or amending the agenda at each time that something happens, you can go ahead and take a matter out of order by simple request or motion to take something out of order. And that allows you to get something done, and if that might make the meeting be able to move along. For example, if you have people here that are waiting until the end, something's on your agenda, you don't have to be constantly trying to modify your agenda because you have guests or you have other people here or you have legislators here. You can just move to take something out of order and take it in and have that adjustment. Board president could call for it. I would entertain a motion to take item 15B out of order so that we can have our legislator come speak to us and then leave. And you don't have to actually amend your agenda.
So would that be for any agenda item, no matter how minor it may be, we still have to motion to move stuff around?
Yes, or you have to move to amend your agenda.
I guess that's what we should have done.
See, I like that better because at some point,
Yeah.
For your board secretary is that if you amend your agenda, then they have to keep track of where you were and what you did in what order for the minutes. If you take something out of order, it's a lot easier just to stick it in and address it. If you want to end the debate, you have been debating for quite some time now. It can be I move for the previous question. And yes, if you can't get anybody to be quiet, Ms. Mortensen, it does become a majority vote. But it should be able to be a point of order, call the question, and you can go to the vote. However, if people are still debating and continue to want to debate, then it has to go to a majority vote to end the debate. To recess a meeting, you can move to have that meeting recessed. We talked about that as a very good tool. If you can't get through your agenda in one night, or things have transpired at your meeting that require a cooling off period, you can do a recess. And that's simply with a move to recess until, and then that's sufficient notice to the public that you are now going to continue this meeting on Thursday. Okay? Obviously, the most valued one is the I move to adjourn. The one thing the caveat with that is you cannot move to adjourn or consider it as a second or even consider it if there is a pending matter before the board. Okay? If there is a debate going on an active motion, board president cannot address, and it is out of order for him to take a motion to adjourn. Okay. If the board, you also have the ability to challenge the board president with regards to points of in order or out of order, and you can do that under the rules with regards to I challenge the ruling of the president on I move to overrule him on a particular point of order. And you can do it, but it does go back and becomes a majority vote and needs a second. Okay? But those are only on points of order and those things that the board president has. The board president calling a vote on a pending motion is not out of order. Okay? complain about noise, temperature, or just the general surroundings, that you can't hear the speaker, whatever, that's just a point of order. And the point of order is to allow the board president an opportunity to either, this is how it's going to be, or we're going to rectify it, or we'll recess for 15 minutes while the administration figures out what's going on with the sound system, blah, 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 whatever it takes, but it's a point of order. Or point of privilege. If somebody says, if it's starting to get heated, and that somebody has said something that maybe they shouldn't have in the spirit of the debate, that's a point of order. And the board president rules on points of order. Point of privilege, you just want to get something that's, temperature's too hot in here, you know, not everybody has a chair, that kind of stuff, those are points of privilege. Points of order is, I have an objection to what we're doing and how we're doing it. And the board president has to address those as points of order. Okay? A point of information is basically in other words, if your guys are debating something and somebody's talking about some, perhaps not everybody knows what JOM means, for example, Johnson O'Malley funds, and now they're talking about JOM, but you have no idea what JOM is, you can do a point of information, and you can interrupt the speaker at that point and say, I don't know what you're talking about. What is JOM? But you introduce it as a point of information, which tells the speaker, I'm not trying to cut you off. I'm not trying to cut you at the knees. You're using an acronym, you're using a name, you're using something that I don't understand. I don't know what you're talking about. And I need that information to understand the debate and the discussion. Okay? Now, if does anybody have any questions with regards to any of these things? It just provides, like I said, it provides you with a little bit of structure. It's something you could fall back on, and it doesn't hopefully relieves the idea of 2-3 people talking at the same time, trying to be heard. And you can do that by your points of order, points of privilege, points of information, moving for things to be done or not being done. But again, it's also very important that accepting the point of information, the rules do not permit anybody to be interrupted while they're talking. And they're putting forth their business. Okay? So, everybody should be heard, everybody should be set second, and then you should have the proper debate. And that is what the Open Meetings Act was all designed about, whether it's any action item or whatever, is the public's entitled to hear the debate. Whether you get along or you don't get along. They're entitled to hear the debate. So, amend them as you need to, or call for a point of order if the person will amend their motion, or as the board president says, a substitute motion, and put it out there so that you have one voting item at a time. But now that we're very structured with the OMA with regards to the agenda items, pretty much know what business is coming down the road. Now, again, this motion practice or parliamentary procedure is also how you can get things done, including new business. I move that, for example, that the buying of blue socks be placed on the next meeting agenda. If it gets seconded, it can be debated, and then it gets voted upon. If it gets voted upon, it is on the next agenda. By action of the board. Okay? Now the debate cannot be about the substance of the blue sock buying, but has to be on the substance of, is that the appropriate time to do it? Should we be doing that? Or, hey, this has been deferred before, we're not going to do that, or whatever. That's the discussion you have, is simply, is it appropriate to put it on the agenda? Okay? But that's how you can get things, that's how you can also, a new business. I move that the superintendent provide us with the following information for our next board meeting. It gets a second, you debate it, and you have a vote. The superintendent's providing you that information by your next meeting, or he's explaining why he needs additional time or not. You can amend the motion at that point to give an additional month or whatever, and then you can amend the motions as they come in order.
Can you introduce business and vote on it as an action item in the same meeting, or does it always have to be something that's like introduce something to be put on the agenda at the next meeting kind of thing.
No, what you're allowed to do is that all action items on the agenda have to be given 72 hours notice. Now, you can add discussion items to your agenda at the time of the meeting. However, the Attorney General's office does not particularly seem to look kindly at them, but it is permissible. You can add, at the time of the meeting, discussion items. But you may not add any action item without the 72-hour notice.
I was going to suggest a motion right now, but maybe I won't.
Maybe there'd be a point of order, point of privilege, or a point of information. We have no idea.
I was going to ask if this is something that we could like maybe include this in our agenda in our packet each week or something like that, just as a reminder.
We
to
just
us.
talked about laminating it, and we'll stick it to your table.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. But we'll have to wait to vote on that until the next.
We'll
meeting.
do it without a vote.
And you all should be familiar with how the process is going. You should all be familiar about the report. For example, we'll have an executive session. The board president is required to give a report coming out of that executive session that's required by statute. So those are all things that y'all need to be familiar with, because you might be point of privilege, Mr. President. We need our report coming out, because you're all responsible for your OMA compliance. So if the board president picks up the agenda where we left off, it could be a point of privilege. Mr. Board President, we need to have a report coming out of executive session. And if that becomes something that we laminate and produce for whoever is board president or whoever's acting, and that we can have that done to make those reports a lot easier and flow a lot quicker.
Okay.
No, because once there's been a call to the vote, the board president has to have declared that discussion and debate is over. Now, if there continues to happen, and somebody needs to make a motion to call for the vote, and you'll do a second and a vote, and then debate is over by action of the board.
That has to be seconded.
It has to be seconded. And if you don't have a second, that means everybody still wants to talk about it. And debate will go on until everybody's satisfied and they call for the vote, or another makes a motion to call for the vote,
Any other questions, board members?
which is to call the question.
What if we have a filibuster?
No such thing, you guys. Just remember your voting things. If one of you abstains and you're a 2-2, the motion didn't carry.
Okay.
3 of you abstain. No motion is even going to be considered, because there's not a quorum for that particular motion. Otherwise, you would die with the majority vote.
Gushi. Any more questions, board members?
Thank you. I appreciate it very
Thanks,
much. And if we need to get something to Joe Gian, I'll help put that together.
Gushi. Thank you, Andy. Okay, board members, we're 6 under new business, 6-7 executive session. Okay, motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion second by Kevin Mitchell. Motion was made by Michael Shaw. Roll call, Joan?
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Miss Manuelito,
Yes.
Mr. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Mortensen,
Yes.
Mr. Long.
Yes.
7:30.
7:30. Go into executive session.
Mr. President. Like to,
Okay. Board members, let's reconvene our meeting.
Mr.
And
President, I
want
move that we
to entertain a
reconvene our-
motion.
I move that we reconvene our meeting from executive session.
Second.
Okay. Motion's been made and second to come out of executive session. Roll call, Joan?
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Ms. Manuelito,
Yes.
Mr. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Mortensen,
Yes.
Mr. Long.
Yes.
8:13.
Okay, we're back in session now. We had an executive session to talk about 4 issues. Bourgeon Academy, Garcia lawsuit, Middle College High School, and the Rama busing issue, and no action was taken. Board members, that's the report. So we're done with our business this evening. I'd like to entertain a motion for adjournment.
I would like to make a motion that we adjourn.
Okay, a motion's been made by Michael
Second, please.
Chow to adjourn, and second by Chris Mortensen. Roll call, Joe.
Mr. Mitchell,
Yes.
Ms. Manuelito,
Yes.
Mr. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Mortensen,
Yes, please.
Mr. Long. 8:15.
Board members, we're adjourned. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your help. Yeah.
8:17.